Hello, hello, hello. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Singers Q&A show. I'm John Henny. I just want to let you know, if you go to my website, johnhenny.com, you can get my best-selling book, Beginning Singing, for free, absolutely free. It's a digital download, so there's no shipping charges, there's nothing. So just go ahead, as you have questions, type them into the comment section, and I will do my best to answer. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. If I think of someone who probably has a better answer, I'll let you know. All right, Anthony, as a singing coach, what are your thoughts on when you teach your students proper singing techniques, but when they start their professional career, they start using auto-tune, the majority of it? So auto-tune is an incredibly helpful tool. And first of all, auto-tune was not invented to be used the way it's used sometimes, but that's fine. You know, early Fender amplifiers had a warning that if you turned them up too loud, they would distort because they thought distortion was a bad thing. And then guitarists went, no, we like this sound. So the kind of breakthrough change on that was the share tune Believe. Man, when did that come out? Is that like the 90s now? Early 2000s. Anyway, and then that created the really intense auto-tune effect. And so that's one way of using auto-tune. But auto-tune can be a really powerful tool in the studio, because if you have a great take that just has that sense of magic in it, you're connecting emotionally, it's powerful, it's right there, but a couple notes are out of tune, you can punch it in, but sometimes just to keep the flow going, they can just do little adjustments with auto-tune. It's not cheating. Sure, you can use it for someone who can't sing, to do auto-tune, but singers, we get tired. Some days the voice just isn't behaving, and so I don't have a problem with auto-tune. Others' opinions may vary. Yeah, so do I know of any supplements that have a good effect on the voice apart from the ones you've mentioned in the voice school community? My diet is vegetarian since 99. Let me see. There's an and to this. I'm not seeing it. Oh, here we go. And I've been doing intermittent fasting since May of this year. So I will share my experience. I lost a lot of weight back in 2017, and it was about 140 pounds in 8 months. And that, while it was good for my health, it did have an effect on my voice. I went vegan. I also practice intermittent fasting. I think that this diet, it needs to be supplemented, and you need to make sure you're supplementing with B12. B12, it's better if you get sublingual under the tongue. It can be lost in the digestive tract. There are vegan vitamins. If you're very strictly vegetarian, there are basically the omegas that you get from fish oil tablets. You can get those in vegan form that they harvest in different ways. I think they get it from algae or plankton or some algae. And so you definitely want to supplement the diet. Make sure you're getting vitamin D. D and B are the big ones. And then there's the ones that I've mentioned in Voice School. Just so you know, Voice School is my online program where I go in and I have sessions like this where I actually work with people's voices, and I have courses and all kinds of things in a private forum. So, but yeah, I would, And I would keep up on the research. Just get into Google and just keep looking up, because they're constantly studying, especially now, plant-based diets, or certainly plant-forward diets, are becoming more and more popular. I have seen where eliminating animal products, the final 10%, if you go from 10% to zero, there's no net health benefit that they see. So consider that. I do in my diet, I'm not strictly vegan anymore, in that I will add some sardines here and there, just to get some extra omegas and proteins, etc. Can I explain more about F2H3 resonance tuning, the whoop and yell timbre? I have an association with the sounds, but not sure how this resonant setup sounds. So basically, we're talking about, for everyone, so F2, Formant 2, they're actually now, Jay, they're talking in terms of resonance 1, resonance 2, and the difference that they're making is the resonance is the actual property in the vocal tract, and the formant is the measurable output that exits the mouth. So the resonance and formant value can be different, especially on higher notes. So essentially what happens in the vocal tract is you send a sound wave. Sound wave propagates in the vocal tract. And this sound wave has many micro pitches in it called harmonics. And there are resonances in the vocal tract. And imagine these resonances are like little rooms in the vocal tract. So you can imagine the vocal tract as being like you're shouting into a closet full of clothes. And so the sound is deadened. But you have these movable spots in the vocal tract that are like shouting into an empty gymnasium or into a canyon. And now there are echoes that slap back and forth within these parts of the vocal tract, and you can move these around. And what happens is as you move them towards one of these harmonics, this echo effect makes that harmonic stronger. So the second resonance starts to move up into the higher harmonics. And so what you want to do is you want to dial this second resonance to the higher harmonics. So what it sounds like moving the second resonance to a higher harmonic is more of that belty, hey, kind of sound. So, yeah, 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 yeah. If I don't have that, yeah, yeah, or goo, goo. Now, that resonance, you notice I'm not able to use as much energy at the vocal cords, so it becomes a falsetto. The resistance at the vocal cords and the resonance are tied together, and you can show this to yourself. Make a really dopey, yeah? And now try and crescendo on that dopey, but don't change anything. Keep your larynx low, you can't. You have to bring in the higher harmonics. You have to tune those in. So what you're doing is you are dialing in this second resonance to accentuate the higher harmonics. Sorry, just need some water. Excuse me. So the key to this second resonance is it's tuned by adjusting your throat and your mouth, just like the first resonance is, but you have a second pair of levers, and it's It's the tongue and the top of the throat. And so as you move the tongue up and forward, more in this kind of like a cat hissing configuration, you're actually going to boost that second resonance higher. People will often point out tongue tension, and they'll go, you don't want tension in the tongue. And so what we end up doing is we just get the tongue just kind of floppy and flaccid. And so if you're trying to, and that tongue is all just loose and laying there, it's not going to work because you're not dialing that second resonance to the upper harmonics. So when you're going for the higher notes, do this for me. Get that hissing cat. There you go. Yay, 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 yay. And you can use that. Yay. Yay, 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 yay. And see if that doesn't help tune in those higher harmonics better. So I hope that helps. Let's see if we have any other questions here. So yeah, if you have questions on voice science, all of this stuff, if you're interested in this voice science stuff, I have a course called The New Science of Singing that I completely redid earlier this year. And it delves into all of the acoustics. The voice is fascinating. The voice, so much of what happens in the voice is actually the acoustics of the vocal tract. The vocal tract is your throat and your mouth. And even more fascinating is that the sound wave itself is created in the vocal tract. The voice, we will talk about the voice because we have to use models to explain the voice. And Dr. Ian Howell, who's a great resource in voice science, he talks about how imperfect models are. All models are wrong, but they are useful, right? We have to, this thing is so complex that voice scientists still debate what's happening. We don't know how the voice truly works. We have ideas, right? So the sound wave itself, we talk about the voice as being steady state. And steady state would be like the bowing of a violin, right? It's just a constant stream of sound. That's not what the voice does. It sounds like it, but it's an illusion. What the voice is it's actually a percussive pop. And you get these events that just pop through the vocal tract. It's like bouncing a spring, right? And just like a drummer, you get a single pop, but a drummer can do a drum roll. And so what the drummer is doing is it's actually, these are still single hits on the drum, but they're done so quickly that the drum now sounds like it's one steady note. And the voice does this. The voice, these events can happen much quicker, much more of them per second than the drummer. So we get this illusion. Here's what happens. Air is coming through past your vocal cords and out into the world. There's no sound because all of the molecules of the air are stable. There's no vibration. What do we need to set the voice in motion? Well, what we need to do, imagine the air molecules are like this. They're a certain distance apart. Okay? Pretend this is a spring. I need to press down on this spring. And what happens when I press down on the spring? I start creating pressure. I start creating higher pressure. Then when I let it go, it starts to bounce back and forth. Now, the other thing I can do is let everything pull apart, the molecules of air. Now, the molecules of air want to be a certain distance apart. And when you pull them beyond that, when the pressure drops, they're going to snap towards each other. And as they do that, nature overcorrects. And so then they go too far together, and then it builds high pressure, and then they spring apart again. This is the sound wave. So how do we create that? We create that by changing pressure in the vocal tract. That's the job of the vocal folds, your vocal cords. What the vocal cords do is you have this steady stream of air. They close against it. And now, this is when the sound wave happens, when the vocal folds close, not when they open. They close, and suddenly the air keeps moving, but there's no air following. And so the air molecules start doing this as that wave pulse of air keeps going. So what happens when it reaches your lips? Well, now the high pressure rushes in to fill your vocal tract. That overcorrects and builds high pressure. Now it springs apart, goes back out. Now it's low pressure, and you get this back and forth. That's the sound wave. That's the energy. That needs to be energized by the shape of your vocal tract. This gets kind of deep. I don't want to go too off the rails, but how you shape your vocal tract, how you shape your vowel, how you use your larynx, the top of your throat, your tongue, your lips, your soft palate, your velum, your jaw. All of these are so vitally important. In fact, it's probably the most important part of the process. And then, of course, we need resistance at the vocal cords. And of course, we need support, a steady flow of air. But this is so, so key. So Jay, you're using the one, yeah. So if the A starts mixing towards head voice, how would you advise practicing this? So on the A, let yourself start getting more of that twang. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And you can even practice that on nay, 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 nay. Get that really edgy nay, 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 nay. And from that little 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then you can start adding a little more intensity to it and dropping the larynx a little bit. What that twang does is it's going to narrow the top of your throat, your upper pharynx, without squeezing at the vocal cords. So the imagery you can use is a little more of a pyramid. Yeah, it's here. Ha, ha, rather than ha, ha. Yeah, and so you start working in that little bit of twang, and then you can start dropping the larynx a little more, and getting more body into it. But what you're doing is you're going to need those narrowings. I refer to Carrie Obert on this. If you don't know Carrie, you should know her work, Kerrie, Obert, Bobert. I think she's at Obert Voice Studios on the internet. Carrie is just brilliant. Carrie's done over 20,000 endoscopies. She's gone down with the camera and seen the voice. And she's a speech language pathologist as well as a voice teacher. And what she observed, regardless of style, even classical sopranos with their voice, is this essential narrowing in the upper pharynx or throat. Just as when you look at the pipes of a pipe organ, you can see which pipes are for the lower notes, right? And which pipes are for the higher notes. They're not only longer or shorter, they're also fatter or thinner. And that thinning of that narrowing of the vocal tract is essential. So try that. But again, so much of the voice is going to be tied into the vocal tract. And this is one of the great things that you can do for your voice is you can just work your voice silently. Jeremy Ryan Mossman is going to be doing a class on this. at the Voice Study Center, and center is spelt the British way, CENTRE. They're based in the UK, and they do fantastic short courses. It's like $35 a class. I'm going to be doing one for them next year. I've already done one for them, but they get, my gosh, it's actually really humbling for me because they just get absolutely brilliant people. Jeremy is doing a course coming up on silent practice. Silent practice is one of the big vocal secrets, if you will, that you're likely missing. Silent practice is very powerful. And silent practice is you do everything but make sound. So Jay, another way you can do this is do everything to hit that note, but make sound. I can feel my tongue take the position. So the back of my tongue is actually going to move back a little bit to help create that narrowing in the vocal tract. And the front of my tongue is going to move forward. Your tongue is like an elephant's trunk. It has independent muscles, and the tongue can move in opposite directions. And so doing these tongue exercises is really, really important. Feel that. Everyone, imagine yourself hitting this note, higher voice types. Imagine yourself hitting that note. Imagine yourself belting that. What does your tongue do? Can you feel the vocal tract narrow? Your vocal tract will narrow from side to side, but also front to back. And the front to back narrowing is facilitated by the tongue. The back wall doesn't move, it's stationary. So you have three ways the vocal tract. You have left and right on the lateral, and front to back. From the sides, and then from the front. And so you can feel that. And do this on a hiss. Ken Bozeman, another great voice researcher, does this exercise. And he does the vowels and he works the tongue. Feel your tongue position on those. You don't want with the tongue flat. Who? That's how you're going to belt the U. If the tongue is too low, you're not going to get those higher frequencies going. Jay, let's see, the hissing tongue mouth position is fantastic. I'll try this. I'll practice this. I'm aware of Carrie's work. Yeah, Carrie, I will tell you, I am going to be doing a course for older singers, for the aging voice. And the first person I reached out to was Carrie, because I know Carrie has more tools. She has amazing insight. And so for me, rather than sitting there for hours on end and Googling, I know I can go straight to Carrie and get information. You can find incredible shortcuts to your learning. And I'm not talking about cheap shortcuts, right? Hacks are an overused word. But if you want to hack, find somebody that knows, that can show you how to do this. Not that just knows how to do it, but can also show you how to do it. And I'll just give you an anecdote. I studied, because I played drums, was my first instrument. I studied with one of the greatest drummers on the planet. I'm not going to give his name, but just mind-blowing. One of my idols. And the lessons with him were more just me being in awe of him, asking him to play. He'd maybe show me some things. But then I went and studied with this older gentleman, Freddie Gruber. And Freddie really didn't play that much anymore. He'd sit down and play, but he couldn't play anywhere near like this other drummer. But he showed me how to play in ways that revolutionized, completely changed my playing. And he ended up, Steve Smith, who played with Journey, studied with Freddie after me. Neil Peart of Rush took a year off to study with Freddie. Freddie was a god of drum teachers, but he wouldn't blow your socks off playing. You need someone who could show you how to do it, not worry so much about how they do it themselves. I know there's a connection, but let me just see. Let me see what else we have here. Can I suggest some exercises for an a cappella choir to properly and cooperatively complete a closed syllable? What exercises can you suggest to get everyone to drop consonants on time and together? So, singers, you know, we don't spend enough time on rhythm, jumping back to my drummer days. Singers really need to understand subdivisions, and they, at a minimum, have to be able to accurately subdivide, of course, whole notes and then ending half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, sixteenths, and then they have to be able to accurately subdivide syncopations within those. And they should also be able to move between eighth notes and 16th notes into eighth note triplets. And that will enable them, because now they have to track not just the balance of the note and blending, they've got to track time, and they've got to build in their inner clock. Bass players, drummers, musicians spend a lot of time working on their inner clock. And it's this ticking that occurs no matter what they're doing. They know where they are. They know where the beat is. They're really, really locked in, and they all have to have this. So I would suggest metronome exercises for them. There is a book, Louis Bellson, and it's called Modern Reading in 4/4, I believe it is. And all it is a book of rhythms. And if you just work the first few pages of that with a metronome, and don't just do it at one tempo, right? Start in the middle, right? I think that's 90 something, and then start to work a little faster, a little slower, and start to fan out the metronome and drill those exercises. And there's really only so many ways you can chop up a measure. Yeah, I mean, certainly you can do quintuplets and septuplets, right? Instead of triplets, right? You can, those are 5. That's rarely used, right? Unless you're doing Frank Zappa or something odd. But they've got to get those basic things going. Closed vowels are going to be problematic if they need to be robust. You can't overclose a vowel. Because what happens? Look, if you can hear that, all the frequencies, when I round those lips, the resonances drop. And so that's great for head voice, falsetto, but if you need something more robust, that vowel needs to be a little more open. Who, rather than who. And so it's playing with the vowel. It just depends on the intensity level that you want, but that needs to open up a little bit. The tongue, depending on the note, needs to become a little more arched, a little more who, rather than who, to get that intensity. Let me see. Nothing But Thieves live a couple of days ago. He switches from chest voice to mix to falsetto, and it's amazing. When watching him sing live, the notes seemed like they were so powerful and loud. He didn't move that much further from the microphone. Made me think about the illusion of singing louder and powerful, but keeping the same volume as the less powerful sounding melodies. How do singers? So more powerful sounds without raising the volume of your voice. Well, first of all, there is, when you're singing live, there's going to be compression on the voice. So these changes in volume, right? Because in a live setting, as the voice is less loud or more loud, that needs to be compensated for, because you can have these dropouts and you can't have the voice wildly swinging. So not taking anything away from him, but there's likely some amount of compression. But basically, he's not shouting, so he has more of that control. Let me see that the name of that band. I don't know that band. I will have to look them up. But I think, who was the opening act on that tour? Let me see. Maybe not. I've got a student out that I worked for on a tour, and I thought maybe that's who she was opening up for. All right, never mind. Anyway. Yeah, her name's Rosalind. She did that song Snap that ended up being like a speeded up version on TikTok. It was like just crazy. Like she got hundreds of millions of downloads on it. Let me see. All right. Who's the most underrated vocalist I've ever heard that no one gives enough respect to? I'll have to think about that for a second. That's a really good question. And it's something that I've answered in my mind in the past. I thought, wow, that's a really underrated singer. And now I'm drawing a blank. No, you know who is, so I can't say the most underrated singer. Because I'm not big on the most, because then I'll think of someone else. But someone who pops to mind as an underrated singer is Michael Hutchence of In Excess. I think he's underrated. I think, and this is going to sound silly, but I think George Michael is a better vocalist, and he's given credit as a great, but he's just he was so amazing. Just absolutely brilliant. I think he deserves even more praise. If I think of anyone else, I'll let you know. So singers who intentionally sing off beat. So the working in a choir, right? Singers have to have this internal clock. But singers also are able to float rhythmically above the band. And that's a thing called back phrasing. And back phrasing is where you will wait and you'll actually purposely get behind the beat and then maybe speed up. And so singers are able to play with that, right? The rhythm section's job is to hold everything down. And then the singer, so as you become more mature with your phrasing and timing is such, you want to talk about underrated. This is a skill set that singers don't think about enough, right? We're obsessed with how high. The first one is how high can I sing? The second one is how strong can I sing? And then my tone, and then fixing the break. And all of these are incredibly valid. I rarely have students ask me, How do I phrase better? How do I sing more in time? When I get these questions, I know somebody is thinking on a more advanced level, a more musical level. Listen to great singers and listen, especially in live situations, singers that are really good live. Listen to how they play with the timing, right? Freddie Mercury he would do this all the time, right? I gave you fame and fortune and everything that goes with it, right? He would pull back and then speed up, and he'd play with these things. And what that does is that reawakens interest in the listener. You have to find these subtle ways of constantly creating new experiences for the listener, because contemporary music is repetitive. That's why it's catchy. So you have to find ways to make it non-repetitive within that structure. Listen to singers like Frank Sinatra and his phrasing. Ella Fitzgerald, great jazz singers. They're just masters of phrasing. And so that's extremely, extremely key. So enunciation is interesting. If you are doing musical theater, certainly opera, but musical theater, depending on the style, enunciation becomes more and more important. All right? Whereas when you get more rock style, etc., enunciation, if it's too crisp, it starts to sound a little too formal. And so what you do is you put the enunciation stress at the beginning, and then the back part of the word just becomes a little lazy, right? And so you don't want to go, "Mama, take this badge from me. I don't need it anymore," right? It's, "Mama, take this badge from me. I don't need it anymore." You start to knock, 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 it's not knock, knock, knocking on heaven's, knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. And so I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's more the feel. It's a little more percussive. It's a little more energy at the front. So enunciation is something you have to be careful with. You want to be able to enunciate clearly, and then you also need to be able to get sloppy with it. I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit, part of the vibe of that song is Kurt Cobain is just kind of mumbling. You almost don't know what he's saying. Early REM was, Michael Stipe was famous for kind of just mumbling the lyrics, and that's part of the vibe. So you really just kind of have to tune into what the style is and what the vibe is. I'm not sure what you mean between baritone and falsetto. I mean, baritones all have falsetto. If you're meaning baritone and tenor, the differences are not just range, it's also voice quality, right? A baritone's going to have a richer voice quality. The transition point is going to be a little lower than where it is for a tenor. Really high tenors can have transition points that start to mirror lower female voices, so higher voice types. So it's it's not completely cut and dry, but it's essentially you're going to have, in terms of your vocal equipment, a lower voice type, as you would think, will have bigger vocal folds, and yes, but actually the more important part is a longer vocal tract, right? Just like the pipes of a pipe organ. If it's a larger, longer vocal tract, that's going to emphasize lower frequencies than a shorter, thinner vocal tract. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that opener. Thank you. So, yeah, George Michael was just stunning. There's a Wham documentary that I highly recommend on Netflix. And in retrospect, you really realize his genius. I I'm basically the same age as George. So I think I'm the exact same age as Andrew, and George was a year younger. So when Wham came out, they were teens. I was a teenager, late teens. And so my musical taste, I was too cool to listen to Wham. And so it's only in retrospect I realize how brilliant they were. And you really see what a vital part of that group Andrew Ridgeley was, and how, if not for Andrew Ridgeley, I don't think we would have known who George Michael was. He likely would have been an accountant. He was really withdrawn, really shy, was not the person that was going to go knock on doors, get the record deal, get themselves out there, push. Andrew was the one who just had this amazing outlook on life, and just anything was possible, and this wonderfully positive person who was so supportive. And he really pushed George. And then when Andrew saw George's brilliance really start to flourish, he stepped back, and he had enough of a sense of himself to know that he didn't have George's gift, because they were more equals in the very beginning. And so it really, really is fascinating. Let me see. 3 female rock stars. I want your opinion. Joan Jett, Pat Benatar, Ann Wilson. So if you want just the most vocally gifted, like who just had the voice that would completely blow you out of water, 3 amazing singers. Ann Wilson, Ann just, and even still, as she's older, just those high G5s that she would just knock out were just stunning. Pat Benatar, especially when she first hit, man, Pat Benatar really moved the needle. Ann was one that moved the needle. You're actually talking about 3 groundbreaking women for women singing rock, right? Because rock singers, you had Grace Slick, but it really, and Janis Joplin, but still it was very, very male dominated. And, Ann and her sister leading a band of men when Heart first came out. And so Ann, just mind-blowing when you first heard her. Pat Benatar for those really hard-edged, aggressive vocals. And she really hit extremely hard. I remember going over to a friend's house, and he had Pat Benatar's first album, and she hadn't broke yet. And I looked at it and I said, "Who's this?" And he went, "Oh man, I went to a club and she was playing." And I asked somebody, "Hey, is this where Pat Benatar's playing?" And the person said yes. And he goes, "And then I realized when Pat got on stage, that was who I asked." He didn't even know who she was on site. And then very quickly, she ended up being very famous just within a couple of months of that. And then Joan Jett was just, the Runaways for an all-female band, paving the way for the Go-Go's, and true female bands where they wrote their own music, and to just really embody the rock and roll, almost early punk attitude, and to bring that to her vocals, and the swagger is incredibly important. It's like asking me to compare Freddie Mercury to Mick Jagger, right? So sure, Freddie is the greater voice, but man, Mick was the guy who helped just kind of brings that swagger that he got from pioneers in front of him. And there's of course the whole racial thing and the way that they segregated music. But, Mick was a very important figure, especially in the English bands and the role of the front man. Yeah, I've read that. Both Pat and Ann came from an opera background. Yeah, man, I'm 61. If you think I look like I'm in my 20s, early 40s, well, God bless you, man. I think I've actually got a really nice, expensive light right here. So that gets some of the credit. But all right. Any other questions? Yeah, it's interesting. I used to be really rigid on how I judged singers. And now I realize, everybody brings something to the table. Even singers, if you don't like a singer, I challenge you to stop and go, okay, a singer that's successful, a singer that's making an impact. But ask yourself, but what is that singer bringing to the table? Why is that singer connecting with people? And you'll find something. And it may not be your style, but there's something there. And I'll see this on TikTok. I saw somebody railing the other day that Eagles, that's actually the name. I always used to call them the Eagles, but I was corrected. The name is Eagles, are like the worst band of the 70s. And this person just hated Eagles. That sounds weird to say, the Eagles. And man, I don't understand that. I don't know how you can listen to an album like Hotel California and not find brilliance in that album, even if it's not your cup of tea. Just the production, the songwriting chops. It's just a masterful record. There's a reason why it's one of the largest selling albums of all time. You listen to an album like Rumors. And it's funny, at the time, I was pretty young when Rumors came out, and that wasn't my style of music, because they played that song Dreams over and over again on the radio. And for some reason, I just didn't like it. Now, I think the song is absolute brilliance. So, listen to music you don't think you like and figure out, why does that connect with people? I think it's really instructive. It's really impactful. And it's kind of that, it's a way of looking at music and your voice through a different lens. If you just constantly go, this is what I like, these are the singers I like, and that's all you expose yourself to, you're limiting yourself in a way. And I really encourage you to just be more open and to really challenge yourself and to be counterintuitive with what you think about music and what you like about music. I've done reaction videos on Jacob Collier, and I've had people just go off about how they can't stand Jacob Collier, and that's just so the antithesis of what they like in music. And it's like, okay, I get it. You like music that's simpler, that's folkier, and you think that connects more to who you are. But if you can't listen to that complexity and hear the genius and the way that he's using microtone modulations and how that can hit emotionally, man, you're missing out on an experience. So let me see, Joseph. So you're not trying to be mean, but then you call me a charlatan. That's cool. No offense taken, I guess. You have credentials for voice building. You don't need voice science. I don't know what to tell you, man. I disagree with you. So everyone, go to Joseph Collins. If you don't like voice science, if you don't want to study the voice or know anything about it, Joseph can show you how to build your voice without it. So good for you, Joseph. You do you. Let me see. Steelheart. I will check that out. Let's see. You know what? I will need to end this a little early. I've got to teach in a little bit. But thank you, everyone. I will see you next week. I'm assuming not Joseph, but everyone else, very, very cool. And we'll talk soon.